Two young men whose paths would eventually change the world. Each displayed remarkable natural gifts early on. However, their full potential wouldn't bloom until some time later. The first stood out for his keen intellect and quiet resolve. As a young man, he left his homeland to study law in England. He quickly absorbed new ideas and honed his talents for observation and strategic thinking. Yet, despite all of his abilities, it did take him some time before he was fully able to find his voice. His innate gift for connecting with people and speaking truth to power allowed him to unite millions in a movement that would change history. The second, growing up in a deeply divided society, displayed natural charisma and a gift for communication. Even in his early years, he formed connections easily and inspired those around him. As a young lawyer and organizer, he used his talents to advocate for those without a voice. But his biggest impact didn't come until after a period of retreat where he reflected on how he could best serve. When he returned to the public eye, his extraordinary ability to articulate hope and vision led him to the highest office, breaking barriers and redefining what was possible in the process. These two men, Mahatma Gandhi and Barack Obama, embody the wisdom of the 6'2" role model hermit profile in human design. In this episode, I'm going to go deep into the 6'2" role model hermit profile. I'll go over both the 6 and the second line individually and then discuss how they come together to form this unique and powerful profile. I'll go over some of the pitfalls that this profile needs to look out for in business and how to avoid those so people with this profile can be on purpose and fulfill their potential. Welcome to Heart-Centered Human Design, Emotional Intelligence in Conscious Business, the show that empowers heart-centered entrepreneurs to use human design and emotional intelligence to create meaningful success, work-life balance, and to transform their passion and purpose into impact and prosperity. I'm your host, Vanessa Naja, human design mentor and business coach, and I'm so excited to share how this amazing system can help you live your best life. Make sure to get your free customized human design multimedia purpose guide at vanessanaja.com/free guide, and let's dive in. I've already done individual episodes on both the 6th line and the second line. You can check those out in season 1 of the podcast. Episode 35 covers the 6th line and episode 31 covers the second line. The 6'2" is one of the 4 transpersonal destiny profiles. And what that means is that they really need other people in order to fulfill their purpose. They fulfill their purpose through their relationships. They can be incredibly impactful on other people. Oftentimes, people that have transpersonal profiles will deeply impact others just by crossing their path. They don't necessarily even need to do anything. However, it's important to note that for these profiles, they absolutely need to learn about themselves through their relationships with other people, and they need to make an impact on others in order to fully thrive. Starting with the 6th line role model, this profile lives its life in 3 distinct stages. In the first 30 years, this is a phase of pretty extreme trial and error. It lives very much like a 3rd line, but can be even more extreme in the learning process through experimentation. They really have to experiment and not be afraid to fail or make mistakes, because that is how they learn. There really is no such thing as a mistake for them. Everything that doesn't work out the way they had hoped for is something that they learn from. This period can be quite challenging. 6th line profiles are not quite as resilient as 3rd line profiles. So even though 6th lines tend more towards optimism and objectivity, in this first 30 years, there can be a little tinge of pessimism because of that trial and error and that making mistakes process. Now, once they hit their Saturn return around the age of 30, they retreat. They go into what's referred to in human design as the roof phase. This is where they step back, they integrate what they have learned in those first 30 years. And then eventually at their Chiron return around age 50, they really will have integrated all of this if they're operating correctly, and they step out into that phase of being a role model. And this is very much about living life truly as yourself. So, six lines that are off the roof, they don't have to do anything to be a role model. They just have to truly be their authentic selves. And those first two phases are a big part of the process of really discovering who they are so that they can step out as that authentic self. Sometimes six lines can be referred to as a little bit late bloomers because they go through this distinct process. It's important to note that they have far reaching vision. The sixth line of the hexagram is kind of transitional between whatever hexagram the sixth line is on and the next hexagram. They can really see things that other profiles can't necessarily see. And they go through this process to really hone their ability to be really wise guides and role models. They really have to go through that experimentation process and that embodiment of what they have learned through the mistakes that they have made in order to really use these gifts in the best possible ways. Six lines have a tendency towards perfectionism. They really want things to be the best that they can possibly be. And perfectionism is something that can hold them back in business. It is always great to strive for excellence, to continue to improve and refine, but perfection, it's not really something that's possible. So, for anybody with a six line profile, regardless of what life phase they're in, it is important to be okay with doing your best, trusting that doing your best is good enough. If you're in that place where nothing ever makes the cut and you don't put anything out because it's not perfect, that is really going to hold you back in business. Also, there's a lot of deconditioning to do around shame because there's so much conditioning around making mistakes. Mistakes are bad. You want to avoid mistakes. You want to avoid failure. That can create a lot of shame for six line profiles. And the thing is, there is no such thing as mistakes or failure for them. It's so important to note that part of that process, especially in their third line phase, is to discover what does and doesn't work. They discover what works by discovering what doesn't work. So, reframing that attitude that mistakes are bad or failure is a bad thing is super essential for six lines. And just to understand, there really is no such thing as failure. There really only is feedback. So, watching out for perfectionism, doing the deconditioning work around shame, really reviewing, revisiting how you see making mistakes is absolutely essential for a six line to thrive in business. Now, I also want to say that six lines do have this innate wisdom that shows up even very early in life, even in that first 30 years throughout the roof phase. Just because somebody has a six line profile doesn't mean that they are not going to be impactful or be a role model until they come off the roof. That might be when they really shine and make their biggest impact, but it can happen throughout their entire life if they're living correctly. Following strategy and authority is absolutely key because that will always put you on your right path, on your right trajectory, so that you can live fully and authentically as yourself and make the impact you were born to make. Now, the sixth line, which we've just discussed, this is the conscious side of the profile. And people with a 6-2 profile may be more aware that this is something that is operating for them. But moving on to the second line, this is the unconscious part of their profile. And it's something that they may not be so aware of. People that have done a lot of personal development work might be more aware of this. Of course, human design really helps you build the awareness around the unconscious side of your design. And especially for somebody with the second line on the unconscious side, this becomes really important because the second line is somebody that is naturally talented. They have these natural gifts that come really easily to them. And as a result, they don't see these things as anything special because it's something that is so natural and easy for them. It's not necessarily something they can see in themselves and is often something that other people will point out. Now, with the second line profile and the second line being unconscious, it generally can be challenging for any second line to see their own gifts, but might be even harder when it's in the unconscious position. So, one thing to do is you want to really pay attention to the things that people call out in you, the things that people point out that you are good at. You might not think it's anything special, but somebody will see this in you and draw it out of you. The things that you are naturally gifted at that you also really love are things that you are meant to share with others, that you are meant to use in your role model process. Now, the second line does also receive projections from others, and that can show up as others projecting onto you that you are really good at something and you should be doing that because you're good at it. But if it's not something you love, it's important not to take on that projection. So, being really discerning here around what are the gifts and talents that you really want to develop and use in your role modeling process is super important as a second line. Spending time alone, the second line is known as the hermit in traditional human design. Spending time alone is absolutely essential because that is where you really hone your gifts and your talents so that you can really make an impact with them. Letting people around you know how important it is for you to have your alone time, being in your own space, uninterrupted, doing your thing is so important. It's not personal to the people that you're in relationship with or even people that you're working with that you do need to spend that time alone because that is really what's going to help you be impactful and fulfill your purpose. So you want to find that balance of your alone time honing your gifts while also being careful that you don't get too comfortable in your hermitage and that you never come out and share those gifts. There's definitely a balance here between spending that time alone and then going out and sharing your gifts. And again, following your strategy and authority. People will generally call you out at some point, like, hey, it's time for you to share this gift. Honoring that, if your authority says it's the correct thing for you to do, is really important. Now, following strategy and authority is not always going to be comfortable. There's definitely an element of discomfort that we have to lean into as we go through the human design deconditioning process, because following strategy and authority might sound simple, but it's not necessarily easy, and it's not always going to ask you to do easy things. Working your way up with that, really experimenting with that process is super important for anybody that is living in alignment with their human design. So bringing the two parts of this profile in together into the 6-2 profile, this is somebody that is meant to be a role model and be deeply impactful onto other people through their innate gifts and talents that they have honed and developed over time. This profile is incredibly impactful. It's incredibly wise. It is really able to guide people into their highest trajectory. And I've had many, many brilliant 6-2s in my life. And I'm always so amazed with the things that they can see and with their gifts. And when they're really living in alignment and using their gifts, I have had 6-2 coaches, guides in my life that are on the roof and are not yet in their role model phase. And I don't even know what it's going to look like when they go into the role model phase because they're already such brilliant, wise individuals. Now, you do want to make sure with that 6-2 profile that you have your alone time, that you are honing your natural talents, but that you're also sharing them with the world. And now the 6-2, all the 6-line profiles are a little bit different when they go on to their roof phase. And the 6-2 loves being on the roof because remember, this is that phase in their life where they kind of withdraw, they sit back, they integrate what they learned in that third line process in the first 30 years. And that hermit in them loves being a little withdrawn. So with a 6-2, sometimes at the end of the roof phase, like it's kind of have to pry them off the roof, like they like it up there. And being aware of this, especially as you come into your Chiron return, that it really is time to step out and be that role model that you were born to be and to share your gifts and talents in the way that only you can is super, super important. And again, strategy and authority will guide the way for you. One thing to be aware of as a 6-2 profile, anybody with a 6 line, whether you are a 1 or you love 1, there can be, especially during the roof phase, it can be a very aloof phase. It is really that sitting back, watching what people are doing, but not engaging so much and not taking that personally is very important. My brother is a 6 line profile. He's a 4-6. I've shared about him in the other episodes about the 6 line. I did take it personally when he went up on the roof. I didn't know about human design at the time. So knowing this about yourself, knowing this about your loved ones, especially as they enter that phase, is super important because that first 30 years is going to look very, very different from the second 30 years. And sometimes 6 lines, especially when they don't know about this, like in their 40s, they can start to feel like maybe they're depressed because all of a sudden they're just so different than they were in those first 30 years. So again, knowing about this, Embracing that roof phase, following your strategy and authority are super important here. Now, I want to say with the 6-9 profile, with the 6-2s and any 6-9 profiles, is that that role model phase is not guaranteed. Living in alignment is what will guarantee the role model phase. My dad was a 6-2. He knew nothing about human design. I didn't know anything about human design when he was alive, and he didn't necessarily ever really step into that role model phase. Some people naturally will. I'm pretty sure Gandhi and Obama didn't know anything about human design. I mean, it wasn't around when Gandhi was around. And obviously, they really stepped out into their role model phases and made a big impact. However, that's not always going to be the case. I will say that it's never too late. It doesn't matter when you come into human design. I know people that have come into human design in their 60s, in their 70s, and have gone through that deconditioning process and really stepped out into that role model, even though they weren't necessarily there before that. So don't worry about it. If you are coming to human design later in your life and you have a 6 line in your profile, it's absolutely okay. It is never too late. You get to use your strategy and authority. You get to continue to do your experimenting. As a 6 line, there's always going to be some, doesn't matter what phase you're in, and that is okay. It's absolutely all good. So remember, for your business, allowing yourself to do the experimenting, to go through the trial and error, to know that there is no such thing as a mistake for you, to hone in on your natural talents, see what people call out of you. If it's something you really love, developing that talent, and also knowing that there's a lot of conditioning around things need to be hard and you have to work really hard. And if it's not hard, it's not worth it. Like, that's all conditioning. For you, the things that you're meant to share with the world are going to come easy to you. They're going to be natural for you. They are not going to feel hard. If it is something that feels really hard and you feel like you have to really push and put all this difficult, like broad work into it, then it's probably not one of your 2nd-line gifts. I would move on from that if that is the case for you. Also, with the 2nd-line, because they can sometimes have trouble seeing themselves and they don't know how they do what they do because they're just naturally gifted at it, it can be hard to explain sometimes what you do in your business. One of your best bets is actually showing. Don't tell, just show. Whether you can give people sample sessions, demonstrate what you do through social media, showing people, giving people the experience of what you do can be really, really beneficial for anybody with a 2nd-line in their profile, as can having a trusted advisor. This can be a coach, it can be a good friend, somebody that knows you and knows your talents, that can help you with things like copywriting, can also be really beneficial. Remember, you also want to watch out for that perfectionism, aim for excellence, do your best, continue to refine over time. And if you notice nothing is making the cut for you and you're trying to make everything too perfect and therefore nothing actually happens, you can't run a business like that. So having that awareness around the perfectionism is really important, and allowing yourself to do your best and put things out there and refine over time. The last thing I'll say about the 6-2 profile and anybody with a 6 line is trust is super, super, super important. Once a 6 line's trust has been broken, it can be really hard to get it back. It can be pretty much impossible to get it back. So anybody with a 6-2 profile, when it comes to business and your life and relationships in general, that trust aspect is so, so, so important. So in business, making sure that you are aligning with clients, customers, business partners, colleagues, people that you trust is really going to go a long way for you, because trust is essential. Whether you are a 6-2 profile or you know someone that is, I'd love to hear your experience with this profile. It is so important that we learn from each other about how we experience our own designs. Makes such a big difference. I am not a 6-2 profile, so I would love to hear what that is like for you. Please comment wherever you are listening or watching and let me know. You can also connect with me on Instagram and Blue Sky. Instagram at HD Vanessa Naja, Blue Sky at vanessanaja.com. I share regular content about human design on both of those platforms, and I would love to connect with you. Make sure, if you haven't yet, to get your free human design purpose guide at vanessanaja.com/free guide. It is customized to your unique design and it covers your purpose in the different aspects of your design, as well as some fears and emotional aspects that you need to alchemize in order to really step into your highest potential. Thank you so much for listening.